cost sheet. Today we are here to discuss about cost sheet. So let us know what is a cost sheet. Cost sheet means the total cost incurred for production of a product under different heads in the form of a statement. This statement is called as a cost sheet. Right. So once when you decide to learn cost sheet, you will have to be very clear about the elements of cost, which plays a very major role in the cost sheet. Elements of cost is classified into three, that is material, labor and overhead. Material cost occupies the very important position and major part of the cost is covered by the material cost actually, because the material cost is nothing but the cost involved for purchase of a raw material, that is for very vital for production. Next comes your labor cost. Labor cost is nothing but the cost incurred for the payment of wages to the laborers involved in the production process. Next comes our expenses part. The expenses apart from material and labor which are involved in the process of production is called as expenses or other expenses. Fine. So now material is divided into direct material and indirect material, labor into direct labor and indirect labor, direct expenses and indirect expenses. Fine. So direct material is the material wherein which it is directly involved in the process of production. We call it as direct material. For example, raw materials and petrol, which is very essential for the running of that particular machinery. It is directly involved in the process of production. Direct labor, wages paid to the laborers who are involved in the process of production. Direct expenses, that is any expense which is paid for to meet out the production process, then it is called as direct expense. And all the indirect expenses, indirect labor and indirect material are those which are indirectly involved in the process of production. In case if these indirect expenses are not met out, our production process will not stop. But in case of direct material, direct labor and direct expenses, if anything went wrong, the production process itself would be stopped. That is the difference between direct and indirect here. Fine. So now direct material, direct labor and direct expenses, when all these three added together, you will arrive at prime cost. Prime cost is equal to direct material plus direct labor plus direct expenses. You call it as prime cost. And we also joined the indirect material, indirect labor and indirect expenses. We put together and call it as overheads. So overheads is nothing but the indirect expenses. All the indirect expenses put together, you call it as overheads. Overheads are further classified into three, that is factory overheads, office and administration overheads, selling and distribution overheads. Factory overheads are those overheads which are involved in the factory, that is production process. Take for example depreciation of machinery, then wages paid to the laborers, etc. Rent, factory light, factory power, etc. comes under the factory overheads. Office and administration overheads, salary paid to the supervisor, salary paid to the manager, commission, etc. comes under your administration overheads or administration expenses. Selling and distribution overheads, here the advertisement expenses, delivering charges, delivering charges, etc. comes under your selling and distribution overheads. So this is a short view about the elements of cost. Once if we are clear with the elements of cost, we can proceed with the format of cost sheet. Yes, format of a cost sheet. A cost sheet should appear like this. That is, it should have a particulars column, total cost or amount column, cost per unit column. It is must. A cost sheet should appear in this way only. Okay, fine. We will start from the first information. Opening stock. Opening stock of raw material. Opening stock is nothing but the closing stock of the previous year. The stock which was left over at the end of the previous year will become the opening stock of the current year. Okay, that is what is called as opening stock. Plus purchases which is made during the year, and during that period any raw materials which was purchased, that is called as purchase here. Next comes your closing stock, that is the stock which is available with you, which is left over with you at the end of the year, is called as closing stock, right? So now opening stock plus purchases minus closing stock will leave me behind with the raw material consumed or direct material. Fine. So now direct material plus direct labor plus direct expenses, you will arrive at the prime cost, which we discussed in the elements of cost. Elements of cost itself, what I told you, when all the direct material, direct labor and direct expenses put together, you will get prime cost. Alright. With the prime cost, you are going to add up the overheads. What are the three overheads which